All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good wherever you're watching from, and whenever you're watching from. Welcome to our weekly performance and interview series. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If this is not your first time joining us, welcome back. Again, this is an in-person. There's no one here right now in person, but also online interview series. And then we'll be doing a performance today here at the Museum of Glass in Tacoma, Washington. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors that make this possible. Of course, that's the Museum of Glass, KNKX, Ted Brown Music, Tacoma Creates, Titus Will Cars, and Edward Jones financial consultant Rick Gray. Today, we have the wonderful treat and pleasure of having the brilliant musician and composer and human being, world traveler, the great Jovino Santos Neto with us today. Jovino, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here, and hello, everybody.
So if you're familiar with Jovino's work, you know how much of a prolific artist he is and has been for many, many, many years. If you're not familiar with Jovino's work, I strongly encourage you to Google Jovino Santos Neto and educate yourself, because he is a wealth of knowledge, both from a performance standpoint, from a creative mind standpoint, and from an educational standpoint. So it's a very wonderful opportunity to be able to share some time and barrage you with questions.
Please do.
If you have questions for Jovino, go ahead and put them in the comments. We're going to just talk about a myriad of different topics. As we were setting up today, I started talking with Jovino, and the conversation was going all over the place. I'm like, we have to stop talking because I want to save this information for the interview. So please, if you have questions, let us know in the comments, and we'll do our best to get to them probably towards the end of the interview. So Jovino, welcome back. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you, Karim.
Yeah, so it's been a couple years, I think, one or 2 years since you were here last with us.
Yes.
And I know you're always active composing and performing and doing lots of different things. I think since the last time I saw you, you did a performance with Hermeto Pascoal's band. He was here in Seattle.
That's right. That happened almost a year ago. Was it just around Memorial Day? So that means it was early May. Late April, early May, he was here, and it was for me such an honor to, first of all, with Hermeto Pascoal as my musical mentor, and I was in his band for 15 years in Brazil before I moved to Seattle, where I have created also my own band. So to have my own Seattle band opening up for Hermeto's band, it was like the meeting of the two universes that have been my life for the past 45 years. And so having that at the Neptune Theater that was packed, it was a wonderful party. I mean, I ended up playing with Hermeto, playing with my band, and in the end, my whole band came on stage, and we had just a big party, and whoever was there saw it.
I was working, but I saw a lot of posts from people. I know that it was a very, very special evening of music. Well, so now I'm curious. Usually when I talk to people about Hermeto and his music, I'm not as knowledgeable clearly as you, but I kind of explain that he's kind of like the Miles Davis of Brazilian music. Is that a fair assumption?
It's one way of doing this. If Miles Davis would be composing orchestral pieces and big band, being an arranger, but in the sense that Miles was a mentor of young talents, yes. In that sense, I mean, I started to work with Hermeto when I was 23, after he had already worked with Miles Davis and with a lot of great creative musicians in the United States, including Joe Farrell, Cannonball Adderley, Ron Carter, Airto Moreira. And his first record, done in 1971, had pretty much a who's who of all the great jazz players in New York. So that's Hermeto. And then he went back to Brazil in 76 and started a band with this pretty young people who were very green. And I was one of those.
Kind of like Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers.
Also,
there's all these
that
different
kind of
formations.
Yes, exactly. Like
Interesting.
Art Blakey, too.
Well, the reason I asked that question is much like if you were to listen to Miles Davis, there's different periods, and the sound of his playing and the sound of the group changes. And what I wanted to ask you is, when you had your long association with him earlier in life versus playing with him years later, do you find that the scope of work and his conception has changed, or is the conception there but maybe doing different directions? How would you describe that?
Well, an interesting thing is when I played with Hermeto back in May, it was 90% of the material. It was material that I used to play back in my day, which is over 30 years ago. But he has an amazing band. You know, some of the people who were there with me continue to be there. Some young people who are really brilliant players. So the energy is always there. And Hermeto's concept is a very interesting thing because for most musicians, you are able to kind of trace the beginning, the development, and the blossoming of the musicianship. Well, you cannot with Hermeto. For some reason, it's one of those things like he sprang out fully formed, and even though he's totally self-taught, he's legally blind, so he cannot see much, but he still writes. He can put the paper up to his nose and write this hyper complex scores of music, symphony and big bands and string quartets and stuff. He's always done it. And how he does it, actually, I had a phone call with him this morning. I was actually interviewing him for Jazziz magazine, conveying the questions from a writer for Jazziz, and he wanted me to ask Hermeto these questions. And one of the questions was exactly that one that you're alluding to. And he says, man, I don't know. Sometimes I stop and I look at what I've done and I go, wow, how did I do that? And he doesn't know. He says the reason for that is because he's a 100% intuitive. He says, I never stopped really to try to figure out why or figure out how. He says he does it as it comes to his head, almost like in a dream. And that's how he's conducted his entire life. And because of that, you cannot tell. If you, let's say, take all of his music at random, put it in a hat and pull out one, you will not be able to tell what was when he was 20 years old or now he's 87. So that's a huge range of time, but quality-wise, his music is being always up there.
Well, to be clear, this is an interview about you. I mean, but it's a unique opportunity because you have such a close association, or have
True.
had, so
Still
it's
continues, yes. Last year, 2022 and 23, I was able to actually play with him at conducting a big band playing his music in England for a couple of concerts, and also Switzerland, and also Juilliard with the Juilliard Jazz Orchestra. I conducted that a bit over a year ago, and it was a pleasure for me to bring his music, which is not so well known because obviously, and that in a way applies to me too. I'm not comparing myself to Hermeto, but our music and my music is so much inspired by him. It's so broad that it makes it very hard for people to say, for instance, jazz. So yeah, sure, jazz. We can play jazz. But we say, okay, classical chamber music, what's known as a purely intuitive improvised music. Yes, yes, yes. So what kind of music do you play? Yes. So in that sense, it makes it hard for people to categorize, especially in the United States where there's so much an emphasis in style. You have to define a style and work within that style. So you say, okay, I'm a dance musician, I'm a hip-hop musician, I'm a jazz musician, I'm a classical musician. And with our concept of music that Hermeto calls universal, because it's really broad, we don't really think so much about that. When the music comes out, it comes out as it is. So afterwards, people can say, oh, that's kind of like a Bach motet or something like this, or a suite. I go, yeah, okay, fine. But I'll be improvising some stuff, and I'll be playing it freely too. So it's really a lack of borders, which makes it harder to promote.
Well, that's what I was going to say. At this point, we all kind of know that the reason people do that is because they need to, not need to, or want to sell it a certain way or package it a certain way so that they can monetize it, clearly. But we need to make money on it too. So.
Yeah, I mean, what we do, you still are able to make a living play music like this, and I'm very happy to have raised my family here in Seattle, and have a really beautiful situation, and live from music. But it's never been. It takes longer. Everything takes longer. For instance, like you, I also travel the world and I play concerts. But instead of going with an agent that tries to place me into all the great jazz festivals, it's friends. So a friend who knows somebody helps me book a flight and the ticket, and then we go, oh, I got a gig here. Hey, I teach at this school. Would you come to my school? So that kind of like, rather than the know-how, it's more the know-who. And when you do the things well done, you will plant a seed that keeps growing. So you can go back and have established a network of friends and colleagues pretty much around the world. That's what keeps us going. And of course, you have to help other people too, just like you are helped by them.
Definitely. I want to jump back for a minute because you said something that piqued my interest. You mentioned that Hermeto when he composes, he's doing pen and paper, pencil and paper still?
Hermeto, given his eyesight limitations, for the longest time he was using only actually felt tip, not even pencil, because he doesn't like to erase anything. So he would write, but sometimes when he would like miss an accidental or something like this, a sharp or a flat, he would take some white out and cover up. So for the longest time, his music was being written with felt tip pen on paper. Now he kind of went into a new phase where using a whole bunch of colored markers. So his music now, it's actually, it's art that you can hang on a wall. But of course, you want to play it too. So every time I see him, he keeps giving me more music. I mean, I have at home about 4 notebooks, and each one has about maybe 50 to 100 pieces each. And the latest one he gave me was actually a few months ago when I was in Rio and I went to see him. And he gave me a notebook with 78 pieces of music. They're all kind of like one. The concept is one concept, but he wrote 78 pieces around the concept. The concept is all the pieces are in 3/4 time. All of them have 12 bars each. And they kind of work in a way that you can loop them or play them sequentially. So it's a fantastic, it's kind of like a modular. So you can play one piece and go back and keep playing, or you can play the first and the second and loop those, the first all the way to 78 and back. So it's almost like it's how much music you need, so by the yard, kind of like. And this is brilliant concept, really. And it's not just a conceptual thing, but it sounds good, which is, of course, is the measure of music, right?
Yes. Going back to, I'm stuck on the pen and paper thing here still. So for you, sorry, for you when you compose, I know that I've played some of your music and I know you use software, but do you also do by hand as well still? Or?
Mostly by hand, actually. I do a lot of places where, there's a lot of places where I teach, mostly in the summer. I have been teaching for over 20 years at this camp in California called Jazz Camp West. A lot of great musicians go there, and I've been there for over 20 years, and every year I run a class in the morning, which is called Spontaneous Composition Ensemble. So people show up, sometimes 15, sometimes 30, sometimes 20, and the instrumentation changes every day. There might be a violin player, 3 saxophone players, 2 pianists, a bass player. No, it's whoever's there. It's a non-committal, like people don't have to show up. They show up when they wake up at 9 o'clock. It takes 1 hour. And the concept is that I will write a piece of music from scratch, 0. And everybody will learn it by ear. I would only write that at the end of 1 hour. So that's a pretty good thing because I am actually borrowing people's memories. Instead of me, if I have to remember, I would have to be writing bar by bar. But in this case, we can actually outsource. It's like having a giant network of memory chips. So I might forget something, somebody will remember, somebody forgets something, somebody else remember. And in the end of 1 hour, we're playing a piece by memory, entire. And it's not usually pieces that have structural, 2 parts, 3 parts, improvisational parts, introductions. So the piece is pretty much formed. And when that is done, I will write it down. Then I put it into software, and I bring it to my band, and we play it. Like this year, we're playing about 3 or 4 pieces that I composed at Jazz Camp for 6 days, tune a day, 6 tunes. And then I went to Brazil Camp for another 4 days in which I composed another 4 pieces, or 5 days, 5 pieces. And this music just stays there. And then I also do it at home. Sometimes I notate my basic ideas on pencil. I love pencil and paper. I have a stack of manuscripts, notebooks, that kind of stuff. But then I open up Finale, which is the software for notation. And on Finale, I can still do a lot more things. I can copy, transpose. So then you enter another realm. But essentially, the music starts invisible. It goes through a phase of visibility, and then we try to make the invisible product be as compelling or more than the invisible idea that sparked it.
When I'm writing a piece of music, I find that I'll have the idea in the head first, and I'll start singing it, and then go find where it is on the piano, play it, but then I'll try and sing it first or play it, because if I start writing it, I start to forget if I don't have it fully formed in my head first. Everybody does things differently. I'm just curious your approach.
Same thing. I'm not a singer, but I can say that pretty much everything I write, I sing. I sing for myself or for others, but And it's not that I'm doing that so I'll be a vocalist performing the music. What I'm doing is basically using the voice as kind of like a fisherman uses the fishing rod. You cannot just go there and pick up the fish. You need something to bring the fish closer to you. So my voice is what I do. And I'm not particularly proud of my singing voice. I don't want to say I work with so many great singers that I know I'm not one of those. But at the same time, creating music is that that kind of humming brings it so clearly. I mean, the Greeks used to say it's the muse that whispers in your ear, right? So I believe in that.
Lovely. Well, really quickly, for those that are watching, and as I mentioned, if you're not familiar with Jovino, the first interview that we did, we talked about how he got into music and learned and playing, and there's a lot of history and backstory there. So I encourage you to find that on YouTube and watch that, because we're not going to do that right now. We're not going back. The second thing is we have coffee for Jovino, so I'm going to stop really quick and get him a coffee. 1 second. It'll go better with caffeine,
Thank
I
you.
promise.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Cheers.
All right. Well, I want to talk really quickly. Cheers.
Oh,
cheers,
two?
cheers.
Oh, cheers.
No,
That's
just
how
one.
we-
Just
I
one.
didn't wanna- don't give me two.
I want to talk about, you mentioned education. You have this new project. You started these classes that you're teaching now. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, it started pretty much with the beginning of the pandemic. And I was teaching at a local college. And then with the beginning of the pandemic, several teachers were let go. And primarily the oldest, most, experienced teachers. And this was something that kind of like for a couple of days, it kind of put us into that, oh my God, and the pandemic starting and what's going to happen? There's no more gigs. There's everything, the world is shutting down. So along with my family, my wife and my kids, we started to come up with this idea of offering online classes. And it started right off the bat very well because we had pretty much a captive audience where people were not going anywhere anyway, so they could sit in front of a computer using Zoom and connect. And this has continued. So since the beginning, which was about almost 4 years ago, I haven't counted lately. Last time I counted, I had some 800 and something students all over the world. People from the East Coast, from different countries, and I have people that wake up in the middle of the night in Sweden to watch my classes, and they also gets recorded. So people who sign up, they can watch it asynchronously. So they can have live. They can ask questions live, or they can go later, read everything, the transcripts. They also can download it as a podcast, as an audio, or a video. And the topics vary a lot. I've done Brazilian rhythms, a lot of Brazilian music history. The one I'm doing currently is about groove. It's called In the Groove. And we've done about Brazilian female vocalists, male vocalists, string players, and a lot of historical, also music as resistance, which is really about the power of music to effectuate change in society, And so that inspires me to study and learn more about all these things. And in a way, I translate that to my audience. And I make sure my music classes are not in jargon. They're not just for where I can suddenly start talking about flat 13ths and sharp 9ths, and people go, wait, what is this? So I am very proud that my classes are available. They're accessible to people like journalists, DJs, people who just, they're not professional musicians, but they like to listen to music, and that gives them a different perspective to listen to music from when you know a little bit of the background. And it doesn't really take away the magic. I think it's actually a way to share the magic of the music.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, when we do the performance part of it, Jacques Willis, who is also a student of yours at
Right.
Cornish, I was a student of yours. We both can attest to your exceptional teaching skills, but also performing skills and your ability to convey concepts in a way that are easily assimilated and accessible. If someone wanted to learn more about these classes or get involved with them, how do they do that?
I would say just go on my website, jovisan.net, and which is my name, Jovino Santos Neto, right? And you go on lessons, and there's a whole bunch of them, some past ones and the ones that are currently being offered, as well as private sessions that I also do, or coaching for ensembles. It's I spend a fair amount of time doing this online things because I love communication and being able to communicate with people. I have students in Australia, Sweden, and people who just and they don't have to necessarily take lessons with me every week. I have some people that sometimes every 6 months I'll have a session with them, but that's fine. We pick up where we left, and then continue, being able to give encouragement, perspective, and sometimes a different way of look at things. So I don't play guitar, but I have guitar students. So I'm able to tell from the a non-guitar playing person how about this and that. And somehow, I guess it works. I believe it's effective, and it's something that I always enjoy doing. So every couple months or so, me and my wife would sit together. She goes, okay, what's going to be the next class? And we try to think about, and okay, how about this? So the idea is it's a really good creativity. And when I do the classes themselves, I follow a basic outline, but I'm not reading from a script. It's like I play. There's a lot of spontaneity, a lot of improvisation moments in which somebody asks a question, then you go, oh, let's go here, and then you turn left, but still keeping a main, start on time, end on time, make sure I mention the most important things about whatever topic.
So are these classes, is it a series of classes, like episode 1, episode 2, and then one leads into the next?
Sometimes, yes. The one I'm doing currently, it's two sessions of 2 hours each, so it's 4 hours, in which I play a lot of music, and I also, demonstrate some things. I pick up a percussion instrument or the keyboard's right there, so I can do all kinds of on-the-spot demonstrations of something. Like if I need to show a drum beat, I can pick up a pandeiro and show that, or a shaker, or some basic tools. In other cases, it's more like, say, piano specific. Like I've done the piano music of Hermeto Pascoal, in which I had a camera on the keys so people can see, and afterwards I can even generate MIDI files of what I've played so people can see the light-up keys and that kind of stuff. So I try to use technology as a tool and not be a slave to it.
Wanted to ask you, I've seen you play piano, I've seen you play flute, I've seen you play pandero, I've seen you play electronic drum machine. I'm sure there's more instruments than that. As an educator, you've taught for a long time. I've taught for a long time as well. For me, my opinion is the thing that people seem to struggle with a lot in general is rhythm. That's one of the big things. What's your opinion about that?
Well, I'm doing a class about that right now, but the most important thing to know, and that's what I tell everybody, is really to understand. Well, understand is even the wrong word. You have to feel that rhythm does not live in your head. I mean, your brain is essential for rhythm, but the most important thing is your whole body. I'm actually studying that right now. I just got a new book just last week called On Sound Mind by Nina Kraus. And she talks about, she's a biologist, like I'm actually trained as a biologist, so she speaks in a language that I can easily relate to. And things about the processing of sound in our minds and in our bodies that I had no idea. For instance, we all know that the sound goes from our ears to our brains. I was not so much aware that it goes from our brains back to our ears. Almost like, imagine if your eyes could generate lights like a flashlight. Well, our ears generate sound. And also, if somebody hears music, and now they have like super sophisticated electrodes they can put on somebody's head, and you can actually measure the electrical activity in certain parts of the brain. So it's like the music you hear gets recorded as electrical impulses, and those electrical impulses can be played back as music. So this is like, whoa. It's like your brain is also like a hard drive or a tape machine or a magnetic tape in which it actually stores the music that you hear and you can play back. So this is amazing. I mean, for me, it was like, whoa, that's like a total game changer in how, and different kinds of frequencies. We as human beings are one of the very few species, there's not many, that can actually get into rhythms together. Like, 2-year-olds 3-year-olds, they can clap hands together. They can do amazing rhythms together. They can sing together. And it's also an interesting skill that gets worse as you get older, instead of getting better as you get older, like the coordination and things like this. Older people have much more trouble clapping in time than kids do. So this is something, because it's not really, it's biological, but what happened to human beings that, for instance, our other relatives, like bonobos, chimpanzees, gorillas, they have a lot of vocalizations and stuff, but they don't have anything where they'll clap in time or beat their chests in time. But you have parrots doing that. You have whales doing that. Have some birds doing that. And sea lions. I mean, it's the number of very few, it's a handful of species that can do this thing biologically. It's called entrainment. Means you get into a train. We're all moving. We're all vibing together. And that's the source of music, playing music collectively. And also people learn a lot easier if they are mirroring a human being versus mirroring a machine or a recording. So if you watch somebody playing and you look at them and you hear them, I mean, that's what I learned from Hermeto a lot. I was watching over his shoulders and he's playing. And he says, okay, continue. I would take over from where he was playing and continue playing what he was playing, because I was just, so we have something also known, what's it called? MNS, Mirror Neural System. So we have this kind of ability to mirror what somebody else is doing, which might have to do with our language, because when we hear language, we tend to voice what we hear and to make sure we really get it, even if it's silently. So maybe that has to do. I'm not going to go any further because I'll be out of my league.
Well, I'm curious, based on what you said, that there's a saying that I hear a lot of musicians talk about, it's more important to listen. It's one of the most important things to listen, because I guess what you're saying is you're recording that, and that, of course, gives you more things to draw from as an improviser, if you're trying to come up with your own melodies, as a composer, all of those things.
Yeah. Well, it's the essence of time. Sound is how we measure time. So being able to be in a situation where, preferably in a collective situation where you have an ensemble, 2 people, 3, 4, 100 playing music together, there is something in which you really have to focus on that moment. And at the same time, develop reflexes. So when something happens, but you can react to that either by playing or by not playing. So the ability, and that is something that we learn, the skill of listening, as you said, is so beautiful. When we learn an instrument, 100% of our effort is directed at generating sound. You learn how to get a tone on your horn, you learn how to hit the drums or play the keys to get the sound, So it's all about transmission. But listening is about reception. So when people are too much focused on playing and not enough focus on listening, they tend to play in a bubble. So whatever's happening outside of that bubble takes a long time. By the time they realize it, sometimes they don't. We all have done things where we recorded, and then we go, oh, look at that, the bass player did an amazing phrase, and I was totally unaware of that. Now I'm mixing this record, I got to show that to the world. I wasn't even aware when that happened. So, and some people, as you develop their skill to listen, you are able to respond to that in real time. You hear more, you hear deeper, you hear faster too, because our hearing ability, our acuity of listening is deep. They don't even know how fast it is, but it goes in the range of few milliseconds. We can tell stuff apart at just a few milliseconds apart, which is amazing because our eyes are not able to do that.
And it's like a muscle, like something else. The more and more you work on doing that, it becomes faster. Let me clarify. I can only speak from my own perspective and experience. When I first started transcribing solos by hand, writing it out, it used to take a long time just to get a single note. But after a few years of doing that, now I could hear a 4-bar phrase and remember all the notes and write back the rhythms. And it just takes time. And the more you work on it, the stronger that skill becomes.
It's muscular, but it's also neural. It's also something that you build up some synapses in your brain that enable you to understand also the syntax. Let's say if you're transcribing jazz, and so let's say you're transcribing bebop, So bebop has its own syntax, its own kind of phrasing, or the blues has its own kind of phrasing, like samba has its own kind of phrasing. So when you already develop a knowledge of those things, you are able to kind of like almost predict what's going to happen, but still be surprised by when it happens. So that when you are at that stage where you're kind of expecting, but you're ready for the unexpected. And that's when I think the highest level of creativity in music takes place.
I want to step back really quickly for something that you said. I want to make sure that people that are listening understand. I think musicians probably get it, but when you say, we're trying to get a sound on that instrument, like let's take, for example, the piano. You could have 5 people, different people, go to the same piano and sound totally different on that piano.
Yes.
So when you say get a sound, you're hearing that sound in your head. I mean, yes, you're beholden to the instrument that you're playing, but there's lots of different ways to get different sounds out of that instrument.
True. I mean, we are articulated creatures, right? We all have a lot of, one of the characteristics of our bodies is the extreme amount of articulation. Our legs, our arms, our backs, our necks, we're all articulated. So if you imagine, let's say piano, which is I'm more familiar with, if you think that from my spine or from my heart to the tip of my finger, there's 7 points of articulation. 7 different, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 back there. So you can imagine how much freedom there is for you to use. It's like you have something that has 7 different dials that you can. So in that sense, as you said, and I always say this, the piano is also an articulated instrument. Between the key and the string, in a good piano, there's actually 7 too. So it's like an interface where a human being with 7 degrees of articulation touches an instrument that has 7 degrees of articulation. You see the range of possibilities is almost like staggering. That's why, exactly as you said, you have 3 pianists coming to the same piano, and they will play, and it will sound like your DNA is coming out in the way you play. So many times people want to copy or imitate or the sound of somebody else. It's going to be a lot of work. It's possible, but it's going to be a lot of work because first you have to erase your own sound, which could be even better or different, at least from the other one. So you can get, a lot of people did this, in most instruments. There's like, especially if there's like a musician that makes a big splash, like say Miles Davis harmon mute on his trumpet. A lot of people want to emulate that sound, and which must take a lot of work. I don't play the trumpet, but I believe it's hard because the mute alters the pitch, alters a lot of other things on the horn that makes it hard. So you can do it. But at the same time, there's other people who don't do that, and they are able to go further because they're really going from what they have. Instead of placing the center of gravity outside of you, you work from a center of gravity that's inside of you, which is what Miles did, of course.
I'm curious. I have my own thoughts about this. When you're teaching someone to improvise, everyone naturally has their own ideas, and you can help them refine that. But also, when you're teaching them, we talk about syntax. If they have a certain idea, and you're like, no, it should be like this. You want to give them the freedom and the courage to improvise, because many people deal with they're afraid and I don't want to sound bad. You're trying to give them those skills, but at the same time, you don't want to stifle their ideas. But if they're not playing with good time, or if they're, it's tricky. So how do you as an educator navigate that when you're dealing with someone who's learning how to improvise?
Me as an educator, I can sit there and listen to somebody play, and I can say, well, that was good. However, you forgot that there's a chord change here, or if you were behind the beat here, or you rushed that thing. I can look from the outside of that person playing and make an assessment, and actually even give them a grade. On a scale from 1 to 10, you got a 7, whatever. But you cannot do that when you play. I cannot do that when I'm playing. I cannot play and assess my own playing, because then engages 2 different parts of my mind which are not connected at all. Which means to focus, if I play, focusing on the judgment of what I'm doing, is this good? Is this bad? You think this is too dark. You think this is too fast. So that kind of thought, it's like putting sand on a mechanism or an organism that's moving so smoothly because you start to try, what would so-and-so think if I would do this? So the same thing about the center of gravity. You suddenly start to view yourself as the audience is viewing you, or most frequently as other musicians are. Oh my God, Herbie Hancock just walked in my gig. What is he thinking of my playing? You know, that kind of thing. We all have it, but it takes a long time. Actually, Hermeto helped me out a lot with kind of getting rid of this. It's not being afraid. It's like being super self-conscious when you try to think of what the other people are thinking about what you're doing. Can you imagine? That takes, thinking is already not very fast. Now, if you think what somebody else is thinking, you're basically slowing down. You're driving a Ferrari and you're going at 5 miles an hour because your brain is the Ferrari. It's going super fast and you can move. So it's at one point you can achieve or not. Some people would never achieve that. But I was very lucky to actually at one point kind of go through a period of introspection and basically retire all the judges that were living inside of my mind. Oh, and they were all good people. They're all my friends, my colleagues. And oh, what would so-and-so think if I would do this? It's like, you know what? Take a break. Go home. Let me work on what I'm doing. I don't care what you think. If you think it sucks, if you think it's horrible, it's okay. That's your problem. Now, I am going to work. Which mean it doesn't mean that you just take whatever comes and say, "Oh, this is beautiful." It gives you a lot more objective goals to achieve. Okay, my goal today is to learn this measure, and I'm going to stay here, and I can kind of see where it's not happening, and I can work on it. So instead of being, oh, it's horrible, I'm not a good player, I'm not a good, and it start to come. So my approach to that, just to go back to your question, is I try to get people to get rid of the adjectives. If you can be objective, you don't need the adjectives. Let the adjectives for the people who are enjoying the music, to the critics, journalists, because that's their job, is to put adjectives to your music. Oh, that was amazing. Oh, that was really bad. It's their issues. Me, I'm just trying to be objective to my intuition and to what's happening. And of course, you practice. You tune your mechanism, which is your body. I should say organism. You tune your organism to respond quickly to the ideas that you have. And hope it goes. Sometimes, the concept of mistake is mistaken. So what you do with that? I mean, I made a mistake. Yeah, perhaps you did. But what are you going to do? Go back and fix it? Doesn't work. You can do that in a painting or in something you're writing. Oh, I erased this and changed the words. But when you're playing music, you can only go forward because time is an arrow. It's flying in that direction. So I say, maybe next time I go through this, I'll do something different.
Jumping back, I have a myriad of questions. We don't have enough time. We should have made this 2 hours. When you have a student that really struggles with time, like everyone has their own level of ability, but if you see someone that's really struggling with time and developing a good sense of time, in your years of experience, I know you've come across students. I mean, so how would you deal with that? What would you advise people that struggle with time?
I give them an egg shaker. And just have them play that for a while. Because that's the best way to kind of usually and I speak from not have a good sense of time for a long time. Timing, rhythm in music was always one of my biggest challenges. I would get so excited about the music that I would forget. And then I'm rushing, or I'm usually rushing, because you get all giddy about the music, go hee, and you start to, everything like your sense of time becomes very, there's something called tunnel vision, where you only see the little thing, you forget everything else. So that's the same thing applies to audition. You have a tunnel audition where you're like, oh my God, what I'm playing is right, is wrong. And you get so focused on that, you go, wait. There's a bass player, there's a drummer, there's a percussionist, there's an orchestra. How about instead of being so focused on you, you start to your point, your perspective. We say point of view. That's also point of listening, where it's somewhere above where you say, oh, there you are playing the piano, and there's somebody else playing the drums, and you can see actually that you're playing too much, and you're not listening to the bass players. So that kind of thing usually helps. And the other thing is for you to engage with the basic pulse of the music, the step of the music. Some people get crazy because, let's say, we play something in 7/4 or 5/4, and they want to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. It doesn't work. Again, it's a different part of your metabolism that counts. It's good for counting money. I love counting money, especially lots of it. It's good. But when you're counting music, it doesn't quite work that way. You have to feel the cyclic nature of beats and rhythms, and then it makes everything a lot easier. So it usually involves dropping some baggage rather than acquiring new things. Like, as I said before, children are great. I play with my grandkids. They're like, 6, 8, and we have no problem playing music in time. And they're not trained musicians. They might be playing a whistle going, pa, 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 pa. And they're great. They're really good at it, relaxed. So it's sometimes we have to forget a lot of stuff that we're told to go back to listen again like children.
I have tons of more questions, but there's people in the audience, so I'd like to open this up, or online. If you have any questions for Jovino that you would like him to discuss, or anything that we're talking about that you'd like clarification, do we have any questions? Anyone here in the audience? Anyone online? Not yet. All right, I'll keep selfishly asking my own questions then. All right, you've played all over the world. How many countries have you performed in?
Oh gosh, I never counted. Yeah, I should one day, before I'm too old. No, I mean, when I was with Hermeto, we toured a lot, especially Europe. A lot of tours of Europe, so crossing south, north, everywhere in all the major countries, and I still love to travel a lot. For instance, in a couple of months, I'm going to be in Estonia, which I've never been. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know the place, the food, the vibe, and of course, playing music is a great way to do that because as an intuitive musician, you get to kind of like feel what's going on out there. So this is something that sometimes you go in a place where you have some preconceived ideas. Well, this is going to be like real strict and real tough. And the people turn out to be surprisingly beautiful and amazing. I mean, I've played in places like, Turkey and in Japan, and also the places where the culture in India also. I've been involved with Indian music for a while, being the only non-Indian in some ensembles where I've toured India. And this gives a really beautiful perspective. I mean, the same way that I like the cuisine for so many different cultures, I also like the music for so many different cultures. And traveling, playing music and traveling are the things I love to do the best. So when I'm able to combine the two, I'm a happy camper.
Now, I've never seen you. You seem pretty easygoing. I've never seen you angry. Now, your wife is in the audience, so I don't know. Maybe I'll ask her later. But I'm curious. This is an open-ended question. Out of all the performances you've played, what is one of your most memorable or favorites, and why? And that's a tough one because you've done a lot.
It is hard because they all seem to blend into one river of making music. I've been a professional musician for 47 years this year. So it's very hard to, but I've had some, if I go in the recent past, I'd say that playing with my band together with Hermeto's band last year at the Neptune Theater in Seattle was a real highlight of my entire life because we're able to put together the two universes that I was so much involved with. And normally you hear one thing and then you hear the other and they belong in different continents. And now I go like, wait, this is amazing. This is all together happening right now. And I have people listening to it. And this creates a very important kind of like, wow, moment where you're like, this moment, this is happening. It's like you pinch yourself. Is this really happening? Or is this a dream, So that kind of thing has happened many times. I've had the good opportunity and good luck and chance to have had that happen with amazing musicians. But I don't like to make too much of a to put a monument to that in a way, because it's one thing leads to another, and the next one might be even more amazing. So I like to keep that open, and it doesn't matter where I'm playing to 20 people, 10 people, coffee shop, big festival. In that sense, it doesn't really matter because you were giving 100%, or even more than 100%. You will sometimes overcome jet lag and, oh, my foot hurts or whatever, and you are able to play music. People say, oh, I have no idea you were in pain when you're doing this. I said, well, that's what happens.
Along those lines, conversely, what's one of the worst performances that you've ever, or memories that you've had? You don't have to throw no names, no one under the bus.
No, it's okay. Usually doesn't have to do with the musicians. Sometimes you play. I actually learned how to deal with that. There was a time when you would, let's say, go play in a restaurant, and nobody, absolutely nobody, is listening to you. And people are talking, they're being loud and disruptive and being kind of like rude. Like they basically are there, and they're taking pictures, and they basically making it hard for you to do your work, because they completely ignore you. So at one point, I would get kind of like upset by that and try to play louder. I'd be really aggressive and play more. I'll show them as if it would be some kind of a tug of war. And after a while, I realized that actually it's a fantastic opportunity to practice when nobody's listening. I can play the same song 5 times. Nobody will notice. And at one point, a couple of times, I remember I was playing in a restaurant, and there was a table right there. And 2 women, they kept, obviously they're having a great time. I don't know how long they had not seen each other. But to me, they sound like chicken, That's how it came to my ears. And I started to, instead of saying, oh my God, here I am trying to play this gorgeous ballad and these 2 chickens are there. And I started to accompany them. I said, well, since they're having such a great time, I want to join their party. And I'm going to accompany their laughter and their conversation. And I switched into doing that, and it took like a minute, and they'd go. They realized that I was actually following what they were doing with my piano, and they go. They stopped, and I continued the ballad that I was playing. And I was like, I don't know, it was an intuitive way of dealing with that, but I think that if I would not play music, I'll be a lot more prone to having anger, road rage on stage, stage rage. But no, playing music is actually what relaxes me. So after I have a good performance and a fun gig, it's great to go to bed and sleep. But sometimes the music's still turning in your head. It takes a while to turn it off, But it's a good thing. I appreciate any time that the music keeps playing in your head. It's a good thing.
Wonderful. Well, we're getting close to the end here, but before we wrap up, does anybody have any questions for Jovino? Anyone in the audience? Anyone online? No? Okay. Well, we're going to take a short break here and then get reconfigured to do some performing. I composed a brand new piece today. We'll maybe sight read, and we have no idea what we're going to play. We'll figure it out. Jovino, as usual, it's a pleasure having you with us here. I hope you know how much you mean to myself and all the other students that have studied with you and musicians that have performed with you. And it's always a pleasure to see such a positive force and influence for music, both performing and educationally out in the world. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. It's
Don't stop.
My pleasure, Karim. Always a pleasure. And I love playing with people, and I love when people ask me to play. It's always a pleasure. And I hope we get to do this more times.
We will. Aside from, we mentioned your website. Say it one more time, please, for those that didn't catch it earlier.
www.jovisan.net, which comes from Jovino Santos Neto. So go there, check it out. I also have a Substack where I post a lot of publication stuff that I'm writing, actually stories about Hermeto Pascoal, videos, like stuff from my private collection of audio and video, which is huge. So if you follow me, become a subscriber. It can be a free subscriber, a paid subscriber. I'm always posting, almost every day I'm putting something new on Substack. And keep following me. It's always a pleasure.
Yes. Concerts. There's always something coming up. What's coming up in the near future? You mentioned there's something coming up in March, but what are the next concerts coming up?
We're playing. I am playing next week in North Bend. with a quartet up in Boxley's, up in the mountain, North Bend. I hope there's some snow up there, but not too much. Also, next month, I'm doing a solo piano performance at Stage 7 Pianos in Kirkland. And this is a real different thing because normally I play with a trio, quintet. But when I play solo piano, I'm really practicing a lot for playing, some really different music by me, also by Hermeto, by Jobim, some other composers. So it's a much more loose but there's a focus on because it's primarily a place for classical music. So to be able to do that should be nice. And I don't remember all the other upcoming gigs, but there's some happening at North City Bistro and a couple of other places. So please stay in touch. You go to my website, which I already said, jovisan.net. There's a calendar there, and you can see what's coming.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you, Karim.
Thank you for coming.